Yeah, do you remember when we climbed to the top of Icefire Mountain and defeated the evil wizard Malkil? Well, that never happened. What really happened was after we popped him a couple of times, old Malkil pulls an Obi-Wan Kenobi and becomes more powerful than we can possibly imagine. Case in point, he comes along and blasts us with one little fireball and we instantly lose everything that we have. Of course, after careful consideration, Malkil decides, you know what? The last 2 times I set up my base of operation on a large vertical structure that required a lot of jumping and did pretty well, so let's go and do it again. And of course, his entire evil mastermind plan simply consists of kidnapping the king and replacing him for this piddly little town out in the middle of nowhere. So without further ado, let's get started with this last monstrosity of the Wizards and Warriors series. So just to start off, Wizards and Warriors 3 takes anything that was fun or even remotely interesting about the first 2 games and replaces it with mindless platforming. There's very little combat involved. As you notice, I'm just pushing around all these guys without any sort of incident whatsoever. So except for the boss monsters, you pretty much have to provoke anything into attacking you. Otherwise you just spend the rest of the time running around and jumping like you have in all the previous games. Now the town we start off in here is probably the worst designed city in the history of video gaming. I mean, if I lived in this town, I would invent a time machine to go forward in time, pick myself up a 44 Magnum, then go all the way back to the initial design of the town and shoot the architect. That's how poorly designed this city is. Much like the other Wizards and Warriors games, any sort of slope more than 3 degrees makes you go sliding around like you're stuck on an internal slip and slide. Fortunately here, there really aren't that many slopes or that many tough jumps that you have to do in the game proper. Now, unlike the previous Wizards and Warriors games, there are no keys that are just lying about at random. You have to buy them all from shops. Fortunately, for the most part, as long as you pace yourself, there's plenty of money to go and buy all the things that you need for later on in the game. Now, given that there are only 3 real areas in the game, what they did is they set up gatekeepers throughout the maps. Any sort of flashing enemies that you see need to have one specific costume in order to get by. And if you don't have the proper costume at that time, then all it's just going to do is cause you a lot of damage. Of course, another brilliant move by the guys at Rare is let's have inns that are like 7 or 8 screens wide before you can actually do anything. There's not a ton of money lying around in the first area of the game, so you just have to make sure that you don't go into any doors unnecessarily. Down here is where we find the first real gimmick of the game. In order to progress throughout the game and get more costumes, you have to find these statues that are lying around and take them back to the proper guilds. Only the bronze statues are easy to get, everything else poses a much greater challenge for us. Over here to the right is where we find our first guild, the level 1 Thieves Guild. Go in, you give them the statue, then you have to go through a test in order to get the next costume. The Thieves Guild tests are colossal pains in the asses. First and foremost, it's an auto-scroll level, and the auto-scroll is always a fun thing to throw in. As you can see, the floor is completely covered in spikes, so if you drop down, you get booted out of the test right away. Things like arrows are pretty easy to avoid as long as you know where they're coming from, but the hardest part of the test is coming right up in just a little bit. These little doors are actually teleport doors. When there are 2 connected on the screen, they'll turn a color to show you which one connects to which. It's mostly a matter of making sure that you hop in the right door from the right direction in order to get to the next part of the stage. The increasing evil gauge means that we've gotten to the end of the level and the boss, the Bronze Thief. Combat's the same as it is in every other Wizards and Warriors games. Just hold down the attack button in his direction and you're going to take a little stab in that area. But for the most part against these bosses, all you have to do is sit there and do ducking stabs because it gives you the most range. The Bronze Thief is relatively easy to fight. Just make sure that you stay at the very edge of your range and keep slashing, and he'll maybe hit you once or twice, but that's about it. And with a puff of smoke, we're now the level 1 Thief. The level 1 Thief is pretty much useless. It's a lot faster than regular Kuros, but his dagger is weak and has absolutely no range to it. Do you like the music? Well, get used to it. There's really only 3 tunes that play through about 90% of the game, and that's the tunes that go along with the costumes. Guess the guys at Rare blew their entire music budget on putting more houses on stilts throughout the city. Now we have a couple more keys, we can actually move on to the next area of the game, and that's the catacombs underneath the city. Down here you'll see the first big gatekeeper of the game, which is this guy that looks like he was a reject from Santa's workshop. As long as we're just as a thief, he's going to leave us alone. Another flashing enemy means an area that we can't get into just yet. This thief is the wrong guy to get through that little section. And over here we have the Bronze Mage statue, which is very convenient because the Mage Guild for level 1 is just right around the corner from here. Yeah, one thing to note is that every test you have to take as a level 0 Kuros. It's not going to let you go in with all the other costumes on. The Mage Guild test is relatively straightforward. It's just going all the way from the bottom to the top of this chamber by jumping on the floating platforms. Being a pure platforming section, the platforms all move in different speeds in different directions to give you a tough time. On top of the outlines of the upper halves of the platforms are completely solid, so you can't clip through from the side to try to get onto the top. It's got to be a straight jump up from the bottom. Try jumping up from the side, it's just going to push you off, and you're going to go falling all the way back down to the bottom. Just so you know, if you fail one of the tests by either falling off the screen or losing to the boss at the end, it kicks you back out to the main screen and takes off 3 bars from your life. The first level mage boss is probably the easiest one in the entire batch. All I have to do is just crouch just outside the range of his staff and keep doing a ducking stab at him. There's absolutely no way that he can hurt you. Oh, and he occasionally does spit out a fish at you, but really that thing is absolutely no harm whatsoever. I'm not sure what looks dumber, the bathrobe or the thief in the woodsman's outfit. Mages have the slowest walking speed of any of the 3 costumes, but it also has the highest jumping ability. The fireball staff is pretty useful because it lets you shoot fireballs in a couple different directions, but overall they're pretty weak. Here you see what happens if you walk into the wood hut without changing into a thief first. The guy will wake up and he's going to come after you and kick your ass. He's incredibly powerful and very tough to injure without being annoying, so you better just walk through as a thief, otherwise he's going to seriously mess your stuff up. Now that we have a couple of costumes, this is where we see another one of the mechanics come into effect. Each area of the game has a specific allegiance, whether it's thief, knight, or mage. If you're wearing the inappropriate costume in that area, then all the guys are going to become hostile and seek you out to try to kick your ass. You can't expect to just change back into a new costume and expect everything to be hunky-dory, so if they've seen you outside the clothes you're supposed to be wearing, they're going to continue to aggro you until they leave the screen. With a simple formula, town is thief, catacombs is mage, and castle is knight. Of course, later on, if you want to go on a killing spree and just destroy every single thing that's walking around, then absolutely, wander around any costume that you damn well want to. So the little flashing beehive that we saw before, our first gatekeeper, we need to have the level 1 mage in order to get by. It's just a matter of standing in just the right spot and shooting up a fireball to knock it off the ledge. But there's really not much to say about this particular part here. It's just another long, boring climb all the way up to the top till we get to the next door that we have to fight. Ducking through this tastefully decorated house here brings us to the third area of the game, and that's the castle. By the way, did I mention that any sort of damage that you take is going to immediately knock you to the ground and stun you for a couple of seconds? Yeah, it's a great little addition to Wizards and Warriors 3. Alright, now we have the complete set with the Bronze Knight statue. Once again, the first level Knight Guild is just right around the corner. Even though you're dressed like a knight, because you're not officially level 1 knight yet, everything in here is still going to aggro you, so those princes are going to slap you around their purses to get within arm's reach. This shows you how much thought and consideration went into the coding of this game by Rare. As opposed to just knocking an enemy back when you hit them, they actually flip upside down and fly back 15 feet. There are multiple inns scattered about the game. There's usually 2 or 3 per area, and they have different things priced at different amounts. Really, all I gotta be using them for is keys and food, that's about it. Much like the levels themselves, the inns have different allegiances, so if you walk in the wrong costume, the guy's just gonna grab you and throw you right out. The obstacle course for the Knights Guild is more Wipeout than it is Ninja Warrior. That's because most of the stuff here is going to damage you as opposed to just eliminate you right away. You got spiked balls to fly out from most of the surfaces, and fireballs that shoot out from those drains in the back. The first level isn't too tough, but it really does get very complex later on. The first knight isn't really tough, it just takes a very long time to do. He's going to stand there waving his sword around slowly, you just gotta wait for him to pull back before you reach in and slap him a couple of times. The more that you hurt him, the faster he waves his sword around, but the delay between sequences is still pretty much the same, so you can go in and whack him 2 or 3 times before you have to run back. It's very annoying just because every one of your hits only takes off a half bar of his life, but every time he hits you, he takes off 2 full bars. This just makes for a long and very tedious process with this guy. And within the first 12 minutes, we've been upgraded to a sword that's longer than anything we had in the previous game. Now, along with getting a sword that's longer than anything we had in the previous game, we can no longer go back to the level 1 form of Kuros, which is just as well because he completely sucked. This is as good as any place to stop, so I'll see you next time on Wizards and Warriors 3 when we start going after some of the level 2 guilds.